Trick-or-treating horror stories. The first story, Roses of the Abyss, a Halloween horror tale. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the eerie whispers of Halloween night. I shivered, not just from the cold, but from a sense of foreboding that crept up my spine. It was my favorite holiday, and yet, this year, something felt different. As a child, trick-or-treating had been a magical experience, filled with laughter and candy. But tonight, the air was thick with a sense of unease. I wasn't sure if it was the knowledge that I had outgrown the tradition or something more sinister that I had convinced my friends to join me for one last trick-or-treat adventure. We dressed up in costumes that we thought were clever but not over the top, an astronaut, a vampire, a witch, and me as a classic zombie. The sun dipped below the horizon, and we ventured out into the twilight. Our first stop was the Thompson house, a creepy, old mansion rumored to be haunted. Mrs. Thompson was known for giving out the best candy in town, so our excitement overcame our fear. We climbed the creaky steps to the front door and rang the bell. Moments later, the door slowly opened, revealing a woman with piercing, glassy eyes and a grin that was too wide. "Happy Halloween, children," she whispered. Her voice sent shivers down my spine. She handed us each a piece of candy from a bowl that seemed bottomless, and we quickly left, not looking back. As we continued through the dimly lit streets, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Shadows danced in the corners of our vision, and every rustle of leaves made us jump. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but my friends were equally uneasy. Our next stop was the Morgan's house, known for its elaborate decorations. We were met with a gory tableau in their front yard, complete with animatronic zombies and a fog machine. We were distracted from our unease for a moment, laughing at the gruesomeness of it all. Morgan, dressed as a mad scientist, handed us candy from a cauldron. But when I looked closely, I noticed the candy was covered in a strange, glowing substance. I tried to discreetly point it out to my friends, but they were too entranced by the spooky scene. We continued on our route, stopping at various houses with increasingly odd occurrences. At the Reeds, a spectral figure peered out from an upstairs window, and at the Ramirez's, their pet raven seemed to whisper dark secrets in its cage. My unease grew with each house, and my excitement had faded into dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong, but I didn't want to alarm my friends. I decided to keep my suspicions to myself. As the night grew darker, we found ourselves in front of an old, decrepit mansion at the end of the street. The windows were boarded up, and the overgrown ivy seemed to writhe in the moonlight. This was a house that had always been off-limits during trick-or-treat, but for some reason, we were drawn to it tonight. My friends hesitated, but I took the lead and rang the doorbell. We waited in silence, and just when we were about to turn and leave, the door slowly creaked open. There stood a tall, hooded figure, their face hidden in shadow. "Trick or treat," we mumbled in unison, our voices trembling. The figure held out a gnarled hand, and in its palm was a single black rose. "A gift for you," it whispered, its voice like a spectral breeze. We hesitated, but the figure's presence was undeniably mesmerizing. We each took a rose, and the hooded stranger smiled beneath the shadows. The wind picked up, and the figure suddenly vanished, leaving us standing there, alone in front of the dark mansion. The roses felt cold and unnatural in our hands, and we exchanged nervous glances. As we turned to leave, the ground trembled beneath us. The ivy on the mansion's walls came to life, slithering like serpents, blocking our path. Panicking, we tried to break free, but the ivy tightened its grip. We heard eerie laughter echoing in the night, and then the mansion itself seemed to awaken, its windows glowing with an otherworldly light. My friends and I screamed as we were lifted off the ground, our vision filled with a blinding, green haze. The world around us twisted and contorted, and it felt like we were being pulled into some nightmarish dimension. Suddenly, we were back on the street, standing in front of the Morgan's house, as if nothing had happened. The roses were gone, and our bags were empty. It was as if the past hours had been erased from our memory. We looked at each other, our faces pale with terror, and realized we had no choice but to go back home. We walked in silence, the trick-or-treating adventure we had looked forward to ending in a nightmare. This day, I don't know what really happened that Halloween night. I don't know if it was a sinister force or a collective hallucination. But I do know one thing, I'll never look at trick-or-treating the same way again. The innocence of childhood had given way to a darkness I could never unsee, and the shadows of that night still haunt my dreams. The second story, the Halloween haunting, unveiling the malevolent melody. The autumn leaves crunched beneath my feet as I made my way through the dimly lit streets of Ravenwood. It was Halloween night, and the air was filled with the scent of pumpkin spice and the distant laughter of children. I had always loved this holiday, the thrill of dressing up in a spooky costume and collecting candy from neighbors. Little did I know that this Halloween would be unlike any other, that I had chosen to go as a classic vampire, complete with a cape and fake fangs. My mother had helped me perfect the makeup to give me a ghostly, undead appearance. The sun had set, and darkness had descended upon the town as I eagerly stepped out into the night, a plastic pumpkin bucket in hand, and my first stop was at the old house on Willow Street. It had always been a bit of a local legend, with rumors of eerie happenings. It was said that an eccentric old woman lived there, but no one had seen her in years. Her house was a dilapidated mansion, overgrown with ivy, and the windows were perpetually dark. That I cautiously approached the door, my heart pounding. The porch creaked ominously underfoot as I rang the doorbell. A few moments passed, and just as I was about to turn away, the door slowly opened. A tall, thin woman with wild, gray hair stood before me, her eyes hidden behind a pair of dark sunglasses. "Trick or treat," I stammered, holding out my pumpkin bucket. The woman extended a bony hand, revealing long, gnarled fingers that sent shivers down my spine. She dropped a single piece of candy into my bucket. It was a strange, silver-wrapped confection that I had never seen before. "Beware the treats you seek," she whispered in a raspy voice. That I thanked her and quickly left, feeling a sense of unease as I walked away from the mysterious woman's house. I brushed it off as Halloween theatrics and continued on my way, but her words lingered in my mind. As I visited more houses, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The streets were unusually quiet, with only a few other costumed kids wandering about. The houses I approached seemed abandoned, and the candy I received was equally strange, unusual colors, odd shapes, and flavors I couldn't identify. The darkness of the night seemed to grow deeper, and the moon, hidden behind heavy clouds, cast eerie shadows across the empty streets. It was then that I heard a soft, haunting melody in the distance. It sounded like an old music box, playing a tune that tugged at the corners of my memory. Curiosity got the better of me, and I followed the music, which led me to a small, abandoned park hidden among the trees. There, I saw a small, hooded figure standing by a crumbling gazebo. In the pale light, I could see that the figure held a box with a twisted handle, the source of the haunting melody. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure turned to me, revealing a porcelain doll-like face with empty, black eyes. It held out the music box, inviting me to take it. Without thinking, I reached out and took the box, and the figure whispered, "Open it." As I turned the handle, the melody played, growing louder and more hypnotic. I couldn't look away from the swirling patterns etched into the box's lid. A sense of dread crept over me, but I couldn't stop cranking the handle. Suddenly, the lid sprang open, and a swarm of shadowy figures emerged from within. They encircled me, whispering incoherent words that sent chills down my spine. I tried to run, but my body wouldn't respond. Just when I thought I was lost to the darkness, a brilliant burst of light pierced through the shadows, scattering them like leaves in the wind. It was a group of children, their costumes glowing with an otherworldly radiance. They chanted incantations that banished the malevolent spirits back into the music box. One of the children, a girl with a shimmering unicorn costume, approached me. "You should never have opened that box," she said, her voice soothing. "It was a trap set by the malevolent spirits that haunt this town on Halloween." I thanked her and the other children for saving me and returned the music box. They warned me to be careful and to avoid any unusual treats or strange encounters during my trick-or-treat journey. With that, they disappeared into the night. Shaken but determined, I resumed my trick-or-treating, but this time I paid close attention to the houses I visited. I noticed that the strange candy in EerieTales had become less frequent. It seemed that the supernatural forces that had plagued the town were receding, thanks to the actions of the mysterious children. As the night wore on, I collected a bag full of normal, delicious candy from the remaining houses, and my earlier frights began to feel like distant memories. When I finally returned home, my heart was still racing, but I couldn't help but smile. Halloween had turned out to be an adventure beyond my wildest imagination. That Halloween night in Ravenwood would forever be etched in my memory. It was a night of strange encounters, malevolent spirits, and the intervention of mysterious children in glowing costumes. I learned that Halloween was a time when the line between the living and the supernatural was thin, and I would forever be more cautious about the treats I sought on that eerie night. The last story, Halloween night. The streets, usually quiet, become a bustling parade of witches, ghosts, and superheroes. Trick-or-treating is a tradition I've cherished for years, but last Halloween, an eerie encounter left me questioning the very essence of the holiday. I was a sophomore in high school, and my best friend, Sarah, and I decided to go trick-or-treating one last time before we considered ourselves too old for such frivolous fun. We'd planned our costumes for weeks. I was a mad scientist, complete with a wild wig, lab coat, and an assortment of mysterious potions in my backpack. Sarah was an elegant vampire, her costume more glamorous than scary. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we set out, our pillowcases ready to be filled with sugary treasures. The air was crisp, and the smell of fallen leaves filled our noses. Halloween was in full swing, and we could hear the distant laughter of children and the occasional shriek from haunted houses. Our first stop was Mrs. Grayson's house, known for her generous candy bars. But as we rang the doorbell, an eerie chill ran down my spine. The old woman who greeted us looked nothing like the kindly Mrs. Grayson we'd known. Her eyes were glassy and her voice hollow, as if she were in a trance. She handed us our candy without a word and closed the door. We brushed it off as a strange moment and continued on our way, visiting house after house. But something was amiss. Each person we encountered seemed to be in a daze, giving out candy without a smile, without the usual Halloween warmth. It was as if the entire town had fallen under a strange spell. As we reached the end of our route, we noticed a dilapidated house at the edge of town. It was the haunted mansion, a place we'd always avoided. But this time, an irresistible curiosity drew us closer. The front gate creaked open, and the path leading to the front door was overgrown with thorny vines. Reluctantly, we stepped onto the porch. The door was cracked open just a bit, and an eerie green glow emanated from within. We exchanged nervous glances, but the excitement of Halloween overcame our fears. We pushed the door open, and the musty scent of old books filled our noses. Inside, the mansion was a maze of dusty, cobweb-covered rooms. The green glow led us deeper and deeper into the darkness. The walls were lined with portraits of people who seemed familiar, yet otherworldly. It was as if the house held the memories of every Halloween from the past. Finally, we reached a room filled with a strange, shimmering mist. In the center, a cauldron bubbled, and a spectral figure hovered over it. We couldn't see its face, but it spoke to us in a haunting, melodic voice. "Welcome, trick-or-treaters. You have entered the realm of forgotten Halloweens. You may have one wish, but choose wisely." Sarah and I were torn. We exchanged hurried whispers and finally made a wish. We wished for everyone in our town to remember the true spirit of Halloween, to embrace the joy and warmth of the holiday once more. The figure nodded, and the green glow intensified. Suddenly, we were transported back to the streets of our town, but something was different. The spell had broken. People laughed, smiled, and greeted each other with warmth. The houses were decked out in spooky decorations, and the air was filled with the spirit of Halloween. By the time we returned home, our pillowcases were bursting with candy. But the most precious treasure was the memory of that haunted mansion and the realization that Halloween was not just about the costumes and candy but the magic of bringing people together. Now, every Halloween, I can't help but wonder if that haunted mansion still stands, waiting to grant wishes to those who dare to enter. And as the years pass, I'm reminded that the true magic of Halloween is in the bonds we create and the memories we share on this bewitching night.